So
a whole lot more we could say about the financial aspect of things, but
now let's talk about another ancient transaction of silver.
yeah.
There we go.
So we're back in Genesis 37.
Yeah, we're on verse 9.
And we
We
stopped.
are.
Mhm. And just to give a
Brief
little bit
review.
of a brief review. They're living in Canaan. The family is Joseph and Jacob and the whole crew.
Yeah.
But the boys are, they've got the herds out. And to Shechem, at least the father thinks they're in Shechem.
Well, that's what we're actually about to be reading. It's not a review.
No, but I'm saying he wants to go ahead and I guess eventually send Joseph to find them, but what we started with in chapter 37 was the relationship that Jacob and Joseph had
As well as the relationship of the brothers.
with the
and
brothers, so that that kind of sets the stage for what's going to follow.
Yeah. Yep.
Basically, he was
Hated by them, loved by his father.
Yeah, and we talked about the natural aspect of Jacob being older, and here's the son of Rachel, and Joseph seemed to have a more quiet spirit about him, more cooperative spirit about him.
Sure.
But he had his own faults, right? We talked about those. Anyway, it just seemed like God was setting the stage for the whole thing to play out the way he wanted it to.
What's potentially intriguing about that situation as well is it almost gives you the sense of the situation that happened on some level in heaven when God made it clear who his son was. You know, that he bestows this special coat on his son, and then everyone else knows this is, you know, an important person. And even though he's the youngest, or kind of that aspect of like he seems lower than us, but he's more important kind of thing. Kind of an interesting parallel to that.
Right.
And then the jealousy evokes them to rage where they just want to kill him,
Right.
which is exactly what the devil was moved to do. So then, of course, he had his dreams, and he had at least two dreams that they would eventually come to bow down themselves to him.
That's where verse 9 starts.
Yep. And he's rebuked by his father and he tells the second dream, but it says that he
You want to go ahead and just
observed the
read those
same.
verses?
Yeah, we can, just to catch us up to the part here.
We didn't read. We
Verse
read 9.
9.
We stopped there.
Oh, maybe, yeah, I guess we did, maybe.
We stopped at 9.
Sorry, I started in verse 9. And he dreamed yet another dream and told it his brethren. And he said, Behold, I have dreamed a dream more. And behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars made obeisance to me. And he told it to his father and to his brethren. And his father rebuked him and said unto him, What is this dream that thou hast dreamed? Shall I and thy mother and thy brethren indeed come to bow down ourselves to thee to the earth? And his brethren envied him, but his father observed the saying. What's kind of interesting about that too is kind of the question of, is Rachel still alive at this point?
It seems so.
Rachel died giving birth to Benjamin.
Right. And I'm the age difference wasn't 17 years, right? So Rachel should be dead at this point. Is he just referring generically to like a symbolic gesture of the mother when he says, like, shall I and thy mother?
You've got mail.
It could also could be Leah.
No, because
Maybe
Leah
Rachel's not his
wasn't
mother.
his
So
mother.
he's saying your mother.
So
I mean, it could technically be a resurrection kind of statement or something, I suppose. But
well, even if she's gone at this point, which is probably the case, he's just basically saying, he's mentioning his mother because she would have been
the
the
moon,
moon, right?
I suppose.
So but the fact that what Jacob knows is that Abraham was chosen by God to to eventually have the line of the Messiah come through his lineage. And he knows the history of the family, that, you know, Isaac then, of course, became the son of promise. And that promise of the Messiah continued through his line. And now, you know, here he is, having God give him the same promise. And so I think what he's starting to recognize here is that, you know, all these other sons that I have, they really don't have the kind of character, you know, they're kind of,
that are worthy of the promise.
they're worthy. Joseph seems like he might be worthy, and he's probably got that in the back of his mind.
But he'll pass the promise to him.
Yeah, the idea of the family bowing down to Joseph seems kind of heretical, right?
Right.
But I think that's why this verse is there. You know, Jacob, I think, is recognizing that Joseph is going to be play an instrumental role in the whole process. So at least that would be my thinking, that, you know.
And he had enough sense to, you know, contemplate it at least and not just completely dismiss it.
Right. And also he wants to show the other kids too that he's somewhat in their corner as well.
Right, like, oh, are we all gonna bow down to you? Come on, kid.
Right. So
Well, plus it would have been natural too for the father to question, because, you know, he was the one that everyone would pay, you know, reverence to, so to speak.
yeah, the word observe means that he really was contemplating this or thinking about it, what it could possibly mean.
Yeah, the word used means to like hedge about.
Right.
So it's like he just captured that thought,
Right.
surrounded himself with that thought, just thinking about it. So
And-
anyway.
And obviously, I'd say Joseph has been getting other dreams, just like, remember, Jacob had dreams too.
Sure.
So there's a connection there. You know, both of them were dreamers. And they were
Yeah,
talking-
I'm sure the brothers probably, I don't know if they had dreams, didn't mention anything about their dreams, I don't think.
He
but-
knows that God communicates certain information through dreams, just because he's
Through
experienced it
dreams,
himself.
through wrestling matches.
Right.
through-
Exactly. So he has firsthand knowledge of that. So now all of a sudden, he's probably wondering, well, here Joseph has a dream. What could it possibly mean?
Yeah. What was all this?
You know,
bound
God's
down
given,
is-
if God is giving this to him, what does it, what could it really mean?
Well,
The
and you
other
know,
thought that came to mind when it said, but his father observed the same, what reminded me of Mary when the angel came to her. And that her response was that she pondered it in her heart. So it's similar.
yeah.
Same kind of
Something
thing.
that you hold on to and just think about it,
Mhm.
remember it.
Yeah, and there's another potentially interesting parallel to this idea that he shares two specific dreams, and one kind of links the heavens and the earth. You know, he's got this idea of the sheaves, the things that grow out of the ground, the plant, you know, the earth, and then he's got the stars, the celestial. You know, so he has this kind of two dualistic thing, which kind of to me relates to the promises that were given to Abraham and then kind of reiterated to Jacob, I guess it was, where he kind of used the different examples of, you know, count the stars and, you know, and then he tells the other one, count the sand, you know, that kind of thing. Or the dust of the earth, you know. So there kind of seems to be some interesting correlation there,
Definitely.
both of those things being mentioned.
And who would be, you know, this may also be a direct connection or indication that, you know, Joseph is a type of Christ,
Right.
because who would be in control of the sun, the moon, and the stars?
And the harvest of the
The
earth.
Son of God.
Well, that's the other thing too, is that, you know, the first one parallels all of them also being an aspect of the harvest,
Mhm.
you know.
And the bread of
All-
life,
Huh?
and the bread of life.
Yeah.
Life, yeah.
Yeah, that's very interesting. It's very dense with a lot of these interesting parallels.
Okay, so the boys went off to feed their flocks, right?
The father's flock in particular,
Yeah,
but
father's
so
flock.
went to feed, verse 12, brethren went to feed their father's flock in Shechem, I guess all except for him. And Israel said unto Joseph, Do not thy brethren feed the flock in Shechem? Come, and I will send thee unto them. And he said, I said to him, Here am I. And he said to him, Go, I pray thee, see whether it be well with thy brethren and well with the flocks, and bring me word again. So he sent him out of the vale of Hebron, and he came to Shechem.
And see that verse 13 there, when Joseph says, go and find your brethren, right? And the father had to say the same thing to Christ, basically. Hey,
See how they're doing with all
Yeah.
the feeding the sheep down there.
yeah, well, see what they're doing down there. They've lost their way and they need a shepherd, you know, but you'll have to go and find them, rescue them.
As a parent, I would think, when you consider what the boys had already done with killing all of those people, we're not talking about, you know, a small matter. They went in there and killed all of the men of that community.
Because of what they did to their sister.
Right. The violence involved in that kind of thing, I would have been very hesitant to send Joseph down to meet them, knowing what they were capable of.
Well, you'd also assume that like they wouldn't kill their own kind.
Right. That his own brothers wouldn't kill him, which they didn't.
Yeah, the thing with Dinah was kind of. a
wanted to.
honest thing.
Right. I mean, we'll get to that in a minute too,
Yeah,
but yeah, and plus he was probably also somewhat concerned because of past dealings in Shechem. Wasn't that where he had some contentions as well?
but you know, Rose is bringing up an interesting point there. I would have thought, as the father, knowing the situation and the attitude that the brothers had toward Joseph, that he would have just sent a servant or some, you know, a hard worker or something. Hey, you know, go, you know, the supervisor of the ranch. or
Maybe you thought
something.
Joseph could reach them better,
Maybe
I think the real reason why Joseph gets sent was kind of God inspired. You know, God is obviously
Getting him lined up for-
There's a script that's being played out here.
that
God,
Joseph doesn't
God
know about.
knows if I send Joseph, right, Joseph will ultimately
surely they will reverence my son.
No, if I send Joseph, he'll ultimately be God. This is what God knows. If Joseph is sent, he will ultimately be the savior of the whole family, right? Because of the famine and so forth. So if I just send a worker down there, you know, nothing happens, nobody gets sold into Egypt, etc.
Nobody gets their way in.
You know, there's no savior, there's no process of bringing a savior for the family. I don't think Jacob knows that,
Right.
but God
Well,
knows.
no, if he knew, he wouldn't have sent him.
God certainly
I don't
knows
think.
that.
I mean, another parallel too, on top of all that, right, is that Joseph is betrayed by his own brothers. Just like Christ was betrayed by the Jews, basically.
Well, of course. Right.
So he's
Yeah,
betrayed
it's
exactly
incredible.
by his own people.
Just over 100 parallels that are here.
Right. And I think also it may also deal with the aspect of his honor, because, you know, I was thinking about this earlier, the idea of whether or not he actually sent Joseph completely alone,
Yeah, that's the other thing.
because
I would think-
I'm assuming he probably sent him with servants.
I would have sent supplies to them and stuff.
Yeah, that he'd be bringing some supplies. Well, plus that, you know, when you look at the distances that he was crossing, it's apparently 50 miles from where they are in Hebron to Shechem. And then when he gets to Shechem, it's an additional 15 miles from Shechem to Dothan.
Right.
Wow.
And so he's going at least probably 2 or 3 days, depends on how fast he's going, but you know, probably 2 to 3, maybe 4 days if you're kind of casually going at an okay pace.
Unless you're on a horse.
Unless you're on a horse or a camel or something, which is
Yeah.
possible too.
Yeah.
But even still, you can only go so fast on a horse comfortably, you know.
And for the horse.
So you figure this is a couple-day journey, and so I'm assuming that he would have had to have packed something, or there must have been some servants that may have gone with him, you know, because the other aspect of this, and it's the same with the brothers, I think there are servants there with them, just because, well, of course, there's enough of them that they could probably manage a herd of sheep, but it just seems like someone with as much of an abundance of servants and things around them as they would have, it would make sense that they'd be traveling in bigger groups than just the brothers and just Joseph,
That makes
especially
sense.
going alone that far. basically through the desert. and
And he's
stuff.
still fairly young, right? He's
17.
17.
So the reason I would also presume that he must have, maybe traveled with some others, I guess, is hang on, the thought came and then it left just as quick as it came.
I hate when that happens. It's right on the tip of your tongue and there you go.
Yeah, it had to deal with the aspect of, I guess, just crossing that distance alone and not trusting, your child's safety to that kind of long journey, as a solo traveler. It might return to me if it was something other than that, but
So he's down there just kind of wandering around, searching them out, doesn't find anybody.
well, what's really cool too, that something I wanted to bring out also was that depending on which route he followed, if he followed the normal trade routes for the time, he would have also been retracing a lot of the family history on his way all the way back up there. And I wrote down some of the places that he went to. So let me get to that in a moment. Yeah, 50 miles. Yeah, and then when we get to that part from Egypt, or from where he was to Egypt, is 230 to 250 miles, depending on which trade route he would have taken. So it's a lot of long journeying. But something that was pointed out was that, just this interesting conglomerate of facts is Hebron is where most of the patriarchs are buried in terms of the Abraham, and where Isaac ultimately ends up being buried, and Jacob. And his journey north, it says, this is something that I read about here, that he would have gone through Bethlehem, where his mother Rachel had died giving birth to Benjamin, and where she was buried. So he would have passed through there on his way up.
It would have been a bit of a bittersweet journey.
Yeah. Well, and that's what makes me wonder how long it may have taken, because I can't imagine if you're passing through a place that important that you wouldn't stop and kind of like go visit and just, make sure the tomb looks good or something. I don't know, just something like that.
And there'll be memories. There might be people along the way as well that you reconnect with.
Yeah. Yeah. And then he would have passed through Salem, which would later become Jerusalem, which would have been, of course, near where Isaac was nearly offered, all those kinds of interesting things. So I'm thinking all along the way too, depending on if these altars were still there, he could probably have kind of visited some of these checkpoints of history as well, and seen where his family had stopped and been making this pilgrimage. I'm assuming he was up on all that history. And then he would have also passed through Bethel, where Jacob had renamed the place. It used to be Luz, but he renamed it when he had his experience of God and seeing the ladder from heaven and all that other stuff.
Mhm.
So there would have been a lot of very interesting, potentially historical things he could have been seeing literally while he was just traveling back up to go see what his brothers were doing. So I just thought I'd bring that out.
It's good that we can try to envision what they really did, because you lose that perspective if you just read the story and take it at face value. If you think about what they actually did and what they had to go through to get where they were,
Right.
it means a little bit more.
And because time, are you at Mount Sinai, Mom? Is that where you are right now?
Get to choose backgrounds on here, and it looks better than my office right at the moment.
That's funny. Well, I was going to say, you probably traveled through a wilderness kind of like that. And then I was like, it actually looks like Mount Sinai. But,
It is.
so, but yeah, so I mean, because we kind of get this feeling, because there's no like mention of the time frame or how long or anything like that, that it was kind of like the go check on your brothers, and he kind of walked for a couple miles and then he found them, and it all just happened like same day or something.
That's probably a process.
Yeah, this was probably like,
Could have been months.
a week or 2 weeks. I don't know that it was months, but I think if we were just accounting for his travel, probably like
A week.
if he was stopping and really taking his time and seeing these places, it might take him a week to get there. But knowing that he was on his father's errand, maybe he wouldn't have stopped, knowing that he was a loyal type. So maybe he would have just, straight for where he was supposed to go to check on everybody.
I think I also probably would mention something kind of like paying homage to his
Maybe
mother's
stop
grave,
and
or
Yeah, it might. So maybe,
because it would show his character. But obviously, this kind of paints the picture that he was just kind of like gung ho to the mission, and it could have been like a solo one, which is why he just kept the pace going fast. more people you have, the slower you have to go, typically. So the idea of him being alone, it could have been the aspect of he just put some stuff on a camel or a horse in a pouch and then just right there. Did it in 2 days or something.
If he had several other people with him, the possibility exists that they would have gone back and told his father what happened.
Well, okay, that's what the thought was that was popping into my
Yeah.
brain, was that one of the reasons he may have sent Joseph specifically was because he realized he was the only one he could trust, because
His brothers
Yeah.
may have lied, or his
Well, I
servants
mean,
may lie to him because his
yeah.
brothers could bribe them or something, or
yeah, I mean,
whatever could happen.
you know, depends on how faithful you are as a servant, but yeah, if you've got a bunch of people and you're buddies with all the different servants and they want to look out for your best interest, then it's like, you know,
I don't know what Joseph's talking about when they said they were doing this evil stuff up here.
yeah, like maybe there just weren't any servants around that weren't somewhat confederate with the boys in one way or another, because they would have been out there working with them, you know, probably more so than with.
Or they agreed with what they did, or
That's just a speculation, but it's kind of like, it does seem weird that he would just send Jacob unless there was something about it that he just, you know, either felt impressed by God to do, but I also think it could have just been that maybe there was no one else there he felt he could really trust.
Well, the way it could have played out too is that he could have had some with him when he got to Shechem. But then once he wandered around, and found out that they were in Dothan, he could have said, well,
You guys wait
go
here.
back, or you wait here, I'll go over to Dothan, which is what. they did.
Possibility.
Yeah.
And, you know, so I do believe that when he ended up encountering his brothers, he was by himself.
Right.
So if he had had some people with him originally, he could have just sent them back or left them in Shechem.
Right.
he would have probably been spared too.
Oh, well, yeah, more witnesses.
Yeah.
So I guess picking it back up there from verse, was it 14?
Yeah.
And he said to him, Go, I pray thee, see whether it be well with thy brethren and well with the flocks, and bring me word again. So he sent him out of the vale of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. And a certain man found him, and behold, he was wandering in the field. And the man asked him, saying, What seekest thou? And he said, I seek my brethren. Tell me, I pray thee, where they feed their flocks. And the man said, They are departed hence, for I heard them say, Let us go to Dothan. And Joseph went after his brethren and found them in Dothan. Yeah. And when they saw him afar off, even before he came near unto them, they conspired against him to slay him.
How would they recognize?
Coat of
him?
many colors.
I can see that coat. Well,
Yeah.
you know, I think
Also, you can
You
tell.
can
You can tell by
tell-
the way someone walks, by the way someone just kind of acts. Like I can pick Elijah out of a crowd somewhat easily.
well, and you don't even need to be in a crowd if you're just like 5 miles out and you get a really nice view and clear. I don't know about 5 miles, but
That's pretty far.
pretty far to recognize.
I would say maybe a mile max.
Yeah,
but
maybe a mile, something like that. You got, 10, 15 minutes before you
a
get
mile is
there.
5,000 feet. Over 5,000 feet.
I got evil eyes, boy.
5,280.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you can definitely recognize at a certain radius, if it's not the coat of many colors,
Anyway, they had enough time before he actually got
the chit
To
chat
them.
about what they wanted to
to
do.
conspire or to say, here comes that dreamer, right?
Yeah,
And he's just coming to get some dirt on us anyway, to tattletale the dad.
Facebook message.
So,
and he's far away from home, so it's a perfect opportunity. Like Dad's not gonna
They
show up
also
or ask.
obviously feel, I guess, somewhat guilty about what they're doing because they don't want the dad to know. I mean, they think they need to hide that from their dad because they know their dad is a holy man.
Well, they obviously do have a respect for him in some regard, but just not in this particular instance.
and so they're gonna, they really have this dream of them bowing down to him. Kind of.
They probably talked about it the whole way they
Yeah.
to Shechem. They were like,
Can you believe that?
Joseph? Yeah.
Yeah, I can believe that.
That guy, he thinks we're gonna bow down to him. He's got something coming.
Yeah,
It's like me telling Jeremy's gonna bow down to me and serve me.
just because he's dad's favorite, right?
Right. Yeah, so I'm sure that was an interesting.
So
point
the
of art.
Reuben, the firstborn, he starts to gain a conscience there.
Well, he at least realizes this is not a good idea and that maybe everyone's just a little fuming. It's been hot and we're all hanging out in the desert, whatever.
Right.
Probably not the desert because they were there feeding sheep, so it had to be something around. And he delivered them, verse 21, And Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands. And he said, let us not kill him. And Reuben said unto them, shed no blood, but cast him into this pit that is in the wilderness, and lay no hand upon him.
What do you think that pit was even doing there? Like, what's the point of that pit? Is it like a waste pit? Like,
Could have been a well that.
A dry well.
Dry well.
I think that's what they pretty much say when they threw him in, that the pit had no water.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming it probably was a
Okay, so
well.
probably a dry
that
well.
dry. Yeah, that he might rid him out of their hands, to deliver him to his father again. So Reuben would make a good politician.
Well, the thing of it is, once they went that far, if Joseph could have gotten out of there somehow and went back to Jacob,
there'd be a
How
lot
was
of
the trip?
consequences.
the boys would have
They
been,
threw me in a pit and
yeah, they, you
took
know,
my jacket. And
that's not just normal. Maybe it is, maybe it was for them, kind of normal,
Given that they were accustomed to just killing other people, I'm sure rough and tumble play wasn't too,
yeah, so.
too out of the question.
Boy,
Well, I say
I
play,
hate to
just
interrupt, but I'm hearing that kind of clicking sound again. I wonder
Dad's
if
bracelets, yeah.
his
He's
bracelets
shaking
are.
his wrists.
It was amazing. I hadn't heard that in a long time, and suddenly I'm hearing it, and I'm thinking, what is that sound from?
Oh, now,
Keep going. It seems like it coincides with talking. That's why I closed the door to my office. I
Dad
thought,
talks with his hands.
Huh?
Dad talks with his hands because he's sitting there shaking his hands, talking and moving his hands around.
are they still on the table?
yeah, they're over there.
Take them away from the camera. Maybe it's an interference with the camera at some
It's
level.
still clicking.
Yeah.
He's running away with the bracelets.
Could be that. Does that fix it too?
Is it still clicking?
Yeah, it's still clicking. So I guess it's not the bracelets this time.
Okay, it may not be the bracelets, Daddy-O. You're welcome to put on your adornments and come
It
back.
almost sounds like the camera is shaking or chattering. It's real light, though. It's not as loud as it was before.
I hear it too.
Okay.
The real low keyed sound. It sounds like an old 8mm camera.
Yeah, it's just a little faint click in the background.
Yeah, but it's not bothersome.
Well, the home church thing had a warning earlier that there was something funky with the audio.
It says we're not ordering the Zoom or whatever, or
It says
Christian.
the channel is
Yeah,
set to
yeah.
mono.
We're doing mono and not stereo.
Yeah, which will cause some mobile devices to not hear your audio. I don't know.
That's different though.
Well, Debbie's on a mobile device. Are you hearing her audio?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
She is. She's good at reading lips.
Well, it's not the bracelets. We know that now.
Well, she still hears Zoom. She might hear the stream.
Right, that's true too. Yeah, we don't hear anything on this end, so it must just be
No,
a
you
weird
don't.
fact that's happening in the projection on your
Move your
end.
phone to the side. Is it better now?
Just keep talking. Well, it's intermittent. It's not constant.
Right, just kinda
First, I
pop-
thought it might have been some kind of low feedback because of my hearing with the door being open, my hearing your audio plus my audio. But no, keep going. This
I can keep going for now.
I don't hear it now.
no, I don't either.
Is it gone?
Maybe it's Elijah's phone.
Could be.
This phone is usually what causes interference. It's if you're receiving any kind of signals like text or anything like that, that's why you hear that
We've got
clicking.
one here.
Yeah, but with my cell phone here in the office,
Yeah, but I'm not getting any
if
text.
a text is coming in, I'll start hearing fuzz in my speaker before it comes.
Any text. I'll move my phone back here and see if it comes back.
We're good.
So for now, we'll just
Wanted
kind of,
wanted to check into that because if it's going into the recording, someone will mention it if they see it.
right. So.
I
so
wanted
Ruben-
to say something about the Reuben situation where Reuben comes to the defense of Joseph because later on, and this is like in the time of Deborah, when Jabin would not go to war without Deborah with him or with her. And in Judges chapter 5, verse 16, Reuben has great bleatings of heart, or and they wouldn't come to the support of the armies there. And I find it ironic that that be Reuben's response here because he's actually coming to Joseph's defense.
Hmm.
I don't
He's
know.
coming to his defense, and yet he's not. I mean, what would have happened if a bunch of the brothers stood up to that one, the one that the ringleader, and said, "No, that's ridiculous. We can't do that. He's our own brother."
Yeah.
If enough of the group had stood up, but it sounded like all of the boys were kind of gutless followers.
Well, they obviously didn't think too highly of him, so it wouldn't take much convincing to be like, why don't we just get rid of him? And everyone's like, yeah, none of us really like the
Think about
guy.
that for a minute. This is someone you've grown up with. This is your own family. Killing someone is a huge leap of logic.
Well, it is for us,
They're gonna be quite a bit
separate
older.
from a violent culture,
They're quite a bit older than him. And so there is some detachment because of the age.
generational gap.
And
kind
that's
of
why
thing.
it seems so absurd that, we would bow down to this little punk, this little kid.
He's fresh on the block.
That feels privileged, that daddy loves more than all of us. So,
Right.
but again, you got to remember from God's perspective, the whole mission here is to get Joseph down to Egypt.
Right, but I mean,
That's the whole mission.
if this weren't the case, of course, a lot of this obviously it parallels Christ and parallels so much of it, which is must be the intention behind allowing it to happen this way.
Sure.
Because I mean, otherwise he could have just given him a dream. Hey, there's going to be a famine in the land, like he does later. Go to Egypt, and you're going to be part of this whole thing. But instead, he allows all this character development to take place.
Right.
To build him up into the person I think he wants him to be, and also to parallel what his son was going to do as well. He allows him to go through these things.
Good point.
But so Reuben is his Reuben saves him this time, sort of. And which part are we at? Verse 22, I guess. Or 23. And it came to pass when Joseph was come unto his brethren, that they stripped Joseph out of his coat of many colors that was on him. So that's another indicator that maybe that's how they spotted him.
Yeah.
And they took him and cast him into a pit, and the pit was empty, there was no water in it. And they sat down to eat bread, and they lifted up their eyes and looked, and behold, a company of Ishmaelites came from Gilead, with their camels bearing spicery and balm and myrrh, going to carry it down to Egypt. And Judah said unto his brethren, what profit is it if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? Come and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh.
Right.
And his brethren were content. I guess except for Reuben, who was probably somewhere messing with the sheep before, not being privy to this particular conversation. So anybody see any striking parallels in there to anything else?
I don't know if I see a striking parallel other than I see obviously like a skewered view on family, but also the more I'm noticing throughout times and like history and through just any story and example is that family is something, interestingly enough, that is usually at more contention than strangers are. Family are bigger enemies than total strangers are people in other lands. All the stories I've seen, Cain slew Abel.
Ishmael and Isaac were related, so that stands to reason.
Yeah, like
The hottest
family.
contention is family.
Family has more hatred in them than other countries at war, in a lot of cases, because they're willing to do more dastardly things to each other.
Well, it's because with
Or-
war, there doesn't tend to be anything technically personal.
Yeah, but I guess with
You know.
family, everything is personal, so everything is exaggerated. But it's kind of crazy to think about how family. I mean, obviously the devil attacks the family, and I think this is just one example that shows that. But it's like the family is one of the most hostile places in the world to be in.
It's not supposed to be, but it is in some cases, yeah.
I mean, you have some families, right, that just outright kill the kids before they're even born. So like,
They don't even give them a shot.
they don't give them a shot.
So Judah's the one that makes the suggestion here, of course, and then Christ, the Messiah, would eventually come through his line.
Yeah,
The line of
Judah.
right.
Yeah.
Uh,
So-
I think it's the first case of child trafficking.
The first biblically recorded case of child trafficking.
Yeah.
I wish it was the first case. It's a
Well,
sad
first
world.
recorded case.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
Anyway,
the fact that they already had a slave trade that was easy to just get into.
you could just sell whoever you want.
Yeah, you could just walk up to a bunch of guys and say, "Hey, you want a slave?"
Like, yeah, no questions asked. Here's some money. But of course, it all worked out. It all works out for good in the end. One of the interesting parallels I was kind of contemplating as well was going back to that idea of a picture of what was going on in heaven. Is, you know, Christ is given this special coat, so to speak, kind of his inauguration or like official announcement of who he is. And then through process of time, he's sent down to earth, which is essentially this pit, you know, in my kind of mind,
Hmm.
where his brethren it's hostile and they want to kill him, but they can't. And so rather, you know, they decide to sell him. And there's also another interesting weird parallel
Of
that
Judas.
surrounding this moment of Joseph going to Egypt, around this whole concept of merchants selling spices and stuff. When Jesus shows up, the wise men bring him spices.
You know, the
and then
ultimate-
he flees to Egypt.
The ultimate thing too, right, is that
Wow.
Judas, right, sells Jesus to the Romans, which in turn they end up killing him, but ultimately puts puts Jesus in a place that's exalted above them. So because of Judas, Jesus was exalted. Because of the brothers, Joseph was exalted. That kind of thing. The exact same kind of parallel happened again.
Yeah, even the names, pretty much, except for Joseph's name not being, you know, Yeshua or whatever, but the whole concept of Judah being the one to do it. And
Yeah.
Judas means Judah. So it's kind of another weird.
And also the idea of the 12, right? The 12 disciples and the 12 brothers. The same exact kind of thing. And the brothers turning on
turning on him.
Also, he in a way is teaching them.
That's true too, because they all technically turned on him.
Yeah.
At the end, in that moment, you know. And then they all end up coming back to him, bowing.
Yeah.
You know, so it's, except for Judas, but not an exact parallel, but it is still very close in a lot of interesting ways. So they, you know,
so they get 20 pieces of silver.
yeah. Which verse are we on now? We're on 28. Yeah. Then there passed by Midianite merchantmen, and they drew and lifted up Joseph out of the pit and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver, and they brought Joseph into Egypt. And of course, you know, I think we've kind of at different times discussed that aspect.
Joseph was
the
10
price.
coins cheaper than Jesus.
Well, so you got to account for inflation, and that's really the problem. Is silver, you know? Well, that's really what it is. Is relative to the time, it was actually like the same wage, pretty much
Same value.
the same
It's kind
value.
of like going from the US to Canada, right?
Yeah, but you got to account for conversion, and there's, you know. So I thought about that as well. As I was like, it
Such a
is
similar number.
it's an interesting parallel to say that Jesus was worth more than Joseph, and there's almost this kind of aspect that it lends itself.
He's a
to, like,
lesser version of him.
Joseph
It
is
makes
the
sense.
lesser version of, but yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that was kind of that's an interesting potential parallel there. And they brought him into Egypt, verse 29. And Reuben returned unto the pit, and behold, Joseph was not in the pit. And he rent his clothes, and he returned unto his brethren and said, the child is not, and I, whither shall I go? And they took Joseph's coat and killed a kid of the goats and dipped the coat in the blood. And they sent the coat of many colors,
Obviously, they didn't have DNA testing back then.
right, or CSI or nothing to go check this out, you know.
Right.
And but it is interesting, you know, that he's concerned about the situation, and then he has to be,
Yeah.
then he literally just chooses to get in line and conspire with the whole situation, which to me is almost a Peter parallel, in the sense that he was the one who was kind of on Joseph's side and trying to be diplomatic, you know, chop the guard's head off and stuff like that until he's not, and then, you know, kind of comes back in this repentant state, but he's like too sorry to be repentant then, so like Jesus has to appear to him later, you know, to kind of bring him back to state. So it's kind of interesting. Guilty, you know. And they sent the coat of many colors, and they brought it to their father and said, This have we found. Know now whether it be thy son's coat or no. And he knew it.
Terrible conspiracy, though.
Yeah, I can't, like, I obviously what it seems to express a little bit later is that they didn't anticipate just how terrible the situation was going to be for their father. They seem to almost think of it as like
He'll
he'll
get
get over it,
And he didn't.
No, apparently not. And it probably aged him intensely.
And of course, if they just dipped it in blood and gave it back, that would be a little bit suspicious. They would have to kind of rip it up a little bit.
Make it look like he was attacked by
Like
an
a
animal.
bear's attack, yeah.
And I mean, this could be a couple weeks of time because, obviously they're
They had to
coming
walk
back.
back.
So it's kind of like they're pretending they were walking back and then they found his coat somewhere between,
And they looked for him or something, maybe. Who knows what they came up with?
right. But they're acting like that, there was enough time between when Joseph was killed and when they found this, that Joseph's body wasn't
Oh, I don't know.
discoverable, so it's like, we don't even, all we have is this.
Yeah.
And, only, whether it's Joseph's or not. So yeah, it's a really terrible thing to do. And he knew it and said, It is my son's coat. An evil beast hath devoured him. Joseph is without doubt rent in pieces. So yeah, it must have been torn up and really shredded to bits. I wouldn't be surprised if what they had done was actually just bring a whole bunch of fragments of it or something, to make it look a little
They
more convincing.
probably enjoyed that process of destroying that coat because it was the symbol of Dad's favoritism.
Right.
But isn't that the enemy, to destroy the robe of righteousness that God has
Yeah.
created or has made? Attempt to, but
Right.
never successful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they destroyed his temporal body, so to speak. That's kind of almost another way of seeing it, is they killed the shell, but not the man, so to speak. And yeah, there's lots. That's another very interesting point. And everything as well with the whole thing, killing the kid of the goats. So there's almost all these other aspects to this kind of atonement process. They're dipping a garment in blood. That obviously has some Revelation vibes right there.
More sacrifices required.
Do what now?
More
Um,
sacrifices
More sacrifices required. They're thinking that Joseph is now dead, and they're, they ended up having to sacrifice another animal to dip the blood in, right? Like, or to dip the
Right.
coat in.
Right.
So it's just a continual process.
Wow. And so what's interesting is that almost follows more closely too with the idea of the scapegoat as well.
Yeah.
That Joseph, even though he wasn't set free, he was, he was spared and sent, and the other one was offered.
Yeah.
So that has another interesting parallel to the idea that God will provide himself a lamb. It's almost that same scenario playing out, that you have the Messiah figure like Isaac not being offered, and then the substitutionary lamb. There was another interesting point that I thought Dad would probably mention. Well, we'll finish this and then we'll kind of go back to it, because it's kind of interesting. And he knew it and said, It is my son's coat, an evil beast hath devoured him. Joseph is without doubt rent in pieces. And Jacob rent his clothes and put sackcloth upon his loins and mourned for his son many days. And all his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. And he said, For I will go down into the grave unto my son mourning.
Which
Thus-
that's an indication that he had more than just Dinah.
Right, that he had sons and daughters.
Yeah,
Yeah,
which is what we assumed. Anyway.
right. Yeah, from last week.
You would have to expect that they wouldn't have all boys.
Right, or that they would just
Well,
have.
if averages with 4 different women, you got to have a certain number of girls.
Right. Well, considering that you've had 9, if you had 9 apiece from 4 different women, it's
It's a flock.
plenty of potential there. I mean, yeah,
It's a full quiver.
it's a full quiver. But yeah, so he and all his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused. Oh, I read that part. Yep. And the Midianites sold him into Egypt unto Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh's and captain of the guard.
Chief executioner.
Yep. Yeah.
Chief executioner.
One of the things that I thought was a potentially interesting little bit of information was the question that they asked, which just made me think of your all the different stuff you've talked about with the atonement and whatnot. Was the question that he asked, let me see, which was it? It was, I guess it was Judah. Yeah, where Judah's question was, what profit is it if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? And I thought if we were making this application to the whole Messiah principle, the aspect of Christ's blood was that there was an essence of his blood that was concealed and now revealed. So that kind of lends itself to another interesting parallel. Just as something that you might pick up on.
Mhm.
I know you're all hay feverish, so. So the concealed blood, that was just another interesting facet to it.
How did they establish the price for which they would get for Joseph? Because to be sold to Potiphar, who is the officer of the Pharaoh, there has to be something fairly impressive for them to get the attention of that caliber of purchaser. I'm not going to take my dirty car and maybe hope to get a good price for it. I'm going to polish it. I'm going to make it look real good. So what was there about Joseph that had him command the attention of Pharaoh's court and the captain of the guard?
Probably his mind and his wit.
Well, also he was probably a healthy specimen. I mean, he
Young
was-
and fit.
I was gonna say his youth.
yeah, his a lot of potential. And again, we have to remember this is kind of God's plan in a sense. He's taking all these unfortunate circumstances, taking which is part of human nature, unconverted human nature, and he's just all things work together for good. So every step of the way.
It could have also been his well-behaved nature too, as someone being sold. He wasn't fighting back necessarily, let's say, maybe he wasn't trying to fight the guards. He was just kind of
Well,
like,
we don't know for certain. I don't think that. There's no question that Joseph did not appreciate.
Yeah,
Sold into slavery.
Being separated from his father, right?
Well, he had a weird.
He begged and pleaded for them not to do that to him.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
once they made that agreement, they knew if they let him go and let him go back home, he would tell his dad what they were going to do, what they tried to do.
And he would especially tell them once they got this far, and he was like, they were going to sell me into slavery.
Right,
It would
Dad. Yeah, and Dad, just think what that would have done to you to think that we could be separated. So I mean, here's this separation from the father.
Wow.
That's the big
That
factor.
causes the father and the son great grief.
Yeah, that's a great parallel there between, of course, the father and the son.
Yeah,
but-
especially with the whole
And the
concept of
father-
thinking that his son was dead.
yeah,
There's this aspect of the father crushing the son as another
Yeah.
kind of
sending
thing.
him.
Allowing him.
Well, in the
Yeah.
sense that he kind of mentally affirms Joseph is dead. It's
Right.
almost that same premise of like God acknowledging the offering, and
Sure. exactly.
having to slay his son kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Joseph had to be in shock in a sense. And maybe as irate as a teenager could be.
Yeah.
And also thinking about the fact that he might never see his father again. Forget his brothers, they're just scoundrels, I accept that, but the fact that he and his father were going to be separated had to be a real trial.
And the,
For
and the fact
him,
that he was a slave essentially would mean he would be separated forever.
So,
Obviously, he knew how things worked. with that.
but obviously Potiphar saw some real potential. And Joseph was brilliant in his thinking, as Simeon alluded to there.
Well, if he was anything like Daniel, then,
Right.
we could presume that he would have been compliant because Daniel was also, imagine just being forcibly castrated and then
Well, I mean,
going to a foreign city.
obviously Joseph, had respect for his captor, and that probably showed throughout the time. He knew that his captor was not the reason he was sold. He was probably like, my brothers are the reason I'm here. He's like, you're not you're just doing what Egyptians do.
Right, probably,
So,
I would think that everybody would agree that it's kind of highly unusual that he would be composed under that kind of a.
Well, not
circumstance.
composed, I shouldn't say, but I mean, like, more or less, thinking about how he had respect for Potiphar and stuff, and didn't want to sleep with his wife or anything like that. And
Well, no, eventually, yeah,
Those
well,
kind of
eventually,
things.
once he got into the
Because they still have
routine,
principles.
Yeah.
yeah, he has, yeah, I mean, that's kind of the unusual thing for a 17-year-old that's particularly being unjustly treated like this, to not want, to not have a revengeful spirit,
Yeah.
to not have a spirit of hatred, but to say, okay, this is the situation I'm in. God knows it. God loves me. God promised to take care of me. I'm going to try to make the best of it. I mean,
Well,
he had to really
maybe he even just thought of his dreams and was like,
Sure.
God, you gave me some interesting dreams, I'm
Yeah.
just waiting to see what
so,
happens.
Yeah, maybe he
And
knew.
is it also not like Jesus brought before the accusers and brought before the magistrate, and he didn't have to say anything? There was, they would silence him from speaking, but even when he did have an opportunity to speak, it essentially condemned what they were doing. And he also said, "You don't take my life, I give it."
Yeah, give it right.
Right.
Right, exactly. So there's a tremendous parallel there as well.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I mean, I can almost picture that, because I mean, like I said, the journey was 230 miles at least.
I mean, there's no
So it's a
question that
long
both
time to be conversing with your captors and
right, both the father and the son severely suffered as a result of the situation here.
both went
Brought
through
about
intense
by
trials.
humanity.
One went through physical trials and the other went through emotional trials.
Yeah, so absolutely. I mean, this is a parallel to the whole separation aspect that,
The whole cosmic aspect of it.
well, the whole separation, it really speaks to the incarnation, God being, the Father being willing to let
To
his
send
son,
his favorite
to let
son.
his son go,
Go a long journey away.
Yeah, so it's right there, man. I mean, this is the story is playing out right here, the gospel story.
Yeah.
I
that's
often think, because Jen and I only had Ben, that would we be willing to give our only son? That would be a pretty tall order. But our Heavenly Father gave his only son
Sure.
that we might know life, and how awesome and how unfathomable is that love that God has towards us.
Yeah.
And I think it's because God knew that some, not all, not nearly all, not the majority by far, would accept the free gift and ultimately be saved, be reunited with him in his kingdom.
Right.
So really what we need to do is come to an understanding of the full breadth of that gift. Because that gift is beyond anything we can comprehend.
As much as one
It is.
could.
It is.
Yeah.
We'll be studying about the plan. Not only the uniqueness of the plan, but just the willingness, the assent of the plan or consent to go through with such a thing.
It'd be interesting to get to watch it in real time or something, get to if you got eternity, you can watch a really long movie, just get to kind of see what the history was.
That's a lot of popcorn, man.
Yeah. There's plenty of corn in heaven, I think.
Okay.
Probably
Yeah.
a tree for it.
Yeah,
as far
tree
as
of
I
life.
know.
It probably
Free of
is.
popcorn already.
Tree of
Yeah, you never
popcorn.
know. God, I mean, I have not seen.
Yeah.
Free-
Free butter and salted.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you just don't even need meat. Maybe you just got
With
fruit that
speed-
tastes like
with
meat.
speed salt.
There we go. I mean, a lot of protein.
Running rampant here.
Well, anything's possible. I mean, it's
Yeah.
whatever,
To them that believe.
Okay, so that is, I mean, obviously, chapter 37 really sets the stage for the remainder of the book of Genesis for sure. And again, it's all about God's plan to get everybody down to Egypt
Right, his rescue mission.
Just so hundreds of years later, they can.
Go back to
They,
Canaan.
they can leave, you know.
Well, they didn't have to leave in the first place if they were, they'd done what they were supposed to. They were there for a while and then.
But again, it's establishing a picture of the Messiah play.
Right.
That's what it's doing.
It's history foreshadowing the future.
All right, well, our time has expired. Our time is gone for this week. So Elijah can close us in prayer and we'll,
Pick up chapter 38 next week.
yeah.
All right. Lord, we thank you so much for the Sabbath, for the rest that you have given, and for all the wonderful things that you've put in your word. There's amazing parallels and so many things to take apart, and I'm sure we're just scratching the surface with what limited information and knowledge we possess. Continue to impress us and to show us the beauty of your mind and the wonderful things that you've preserved. Be with us for the rest of the day. Bless our time together. Bless those who joined us online, and continue to open up doors of opportunity that we might serve your purpose as well as we can, and empower us to accomplish the things that you would like us to do. This we ask and pray in the name of your Son. Amen.
Amen.
Well, great to have everybody along, of course, as always, and appreciate all the input for sure. And forward to catching up with all of you again next week.
Sounds
Hope
good.
everybody has a great week ahead. And
We're all blessed.
Yes, and to everybody there.
Everybody have a
It's so good to see you guys on Sabbath. It just makes my whole week.
Oh. That's a ditto, Rose.
It's good to connect with you. It's good to have a family. I don't have my children close by, so this is kind of my family. So it's a true blessing to have you guys all there.
Just an extended one.
Exactly.
We're happy to have
Okay, everybody have a pollen.
Gary,
prayer?
I hope your allergies lighten up this week too.
We've got rain coming this weekend. I hope that washes some of it out.
Yeah.
It's supposed to rain today around right now-ish.
5
Yeah.
o'clock, 6 o'clock.
Yeah, that's why, like, apparently my work was canceling a bunch of stuff today.
Yeah, well, we can always move to Canada. There's no pollen up there, right?
You'd be welcome here. No pollen, no. No, but crummy politicians.
But ain't
All right,
All politicians, both equally irritating.
So they're
Right.
the same. Can we just thrash them and get rid of them?
Spank them all soundly and sent them to bed.
Oh, there we go.
put them in the pit.
Yeah. Take care.
There we
They
go.
put us in the pits often enough.
Tell them to Potiphar.
Yeah. Happy Sabbath, guys. We'll see you next week.
Sounds
Yeah.
great. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.